Good afternoon. My name is Cassie Findley, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar on developing high performance through organizational transformation. Our topic is one of the foundational skills taught in our high performance leadership mastermind groups. And our expert presenters today are Tony Gay. He's the President and CEO of Business Leadership Solutions. Ray Marcantoni, President and CEO of Mark III Leadership Solutions. And Chip Wilson, our founder and CEO of 360 Solutions. Now, our three speakers are high-performance entrepreneurs and have worked in the leadership industry for over 50 years. Now, I'd like to take just a second and allow each one of them to introduce themselves. Tony, can we start with you?
Sure. Thank you, Cassie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony Gay. I am President and CEO of Business Leadership Solutions. We are an employee training, leadership development, and business consulting firm located in Cincinnati, Ohio. My background includes a little over 20 years experience in leadership training and business consulting field. My experience varies all the way from leading men in combat during the first Persian Gulf War, all the way through starting and running my own consulting firm here in Cincinnati.
Great, thank you. Ray?
Hi, Cassie. Thank you, everyone. Ray Marcantoni, President and CEO of Mark III Leadership Solutions. My background has been in entrepreneurship and in business development, building businesses mostly in the construction arena, 35 years in the Baltimore, D.C. area. I've owned a number of other businesses, and I've teamed with 360 to try to help companies move from that traditional old leadership model to high performance leadership. And I'm glad to be on board here.
Thanks, Ray. Chip?
Hello, everybody. My name is Chip Wilson. I'm the President and CEO of 360 Solutions. We are a global company that primarily focuses on organizational products, leadership development, web-based products. We believe that companies really have two major problems: systems problems and people problems. And we help look at the systems and develop the people to run them. We have about 500 faculty members in the U.S., and we're in 33 different countries besides the U.S. And we've been doing this for many, many years. And so it's been a steep growth pattern, and we're anxious to continue to share what we've learned over the past 25 plus years of researching, writing, and developing high-performance products.
Great. Thank you, guys. So as you just heard, we've got an abundance of experience and some valuable insight into organizational transformation from all different walks of life, businesses, and organizations. So without further delay, let's get started. My first question: so what does organizational transformation really mean to a business, and how does the impact of this transformation impact the success of the business? I'm going to ask Chip to give us an overview of the organizational transformation model and the impact it has on business outcomes. So, Chip?
Okay. Well, I want to start with what we call the transformation model. And really, to simplify what this is, we have what we call 7 focus areas that every organization really needs to pay attention to. And when I do any type of consulting work, helping organizations really kind of figure out where they're at, we start with looking at these 7 areas and asking and digging deep into each of them. Now, the temptation for most organizations is to jump in, pick one of them, and to try and fix problems right away. And I tell people when I start working with them, now, this is really about diagnosing where you're at, understanding the weaknesses of the organization and also the strength, and really analyzing before we move into strategic planning and then obviously implementation of that strategy. So the 7 areas that we really focus on, and I'll start on the right, which is results. That's where I typically work with an organization, as I start with asking them about their results. And we look at that and have them look at those key areas, and then we go back to the environment side and look at what's going on in the environment, externally and internally. We look at things like key customers and key suppliers, stakeholders, those types of things, and the influencers, the factors that are going on in the marketplace. And then from there, we look at the 5 areas in the middle. If we'll go back to the first model, that one. If you'll look at results and environment, which are outside of the box, what you see is that results, with the arrow that goes down and across and back to environment, really helps people understand how they perceive the environment. For example, if we're getting really good results in our company right now, profits are high, turnover's low, we're innovative, we're the leader in the industry, all of those types of things, we tend to see the environment differently than if we are not necessarily doing well in the market. If we're not doing well in the market, our results are low, our turnover is high, we're struggling to be innovative and so on and so forth, a lot of times we tend to blame it on the environment because our paradigm of the way the environment is negative. So we see that those two kind of tie together. Leave it right there on that model for a minute. We see that those two tie together. Now, all 5 steps in the middle you will see are things that we have control over inside of our organizations, inside of the company itself. One is, what is our strategy? Then it ties to our core processes, our structure, the systems, and the culture. We're going to talk about each of those individually as we go. But to give an analogy of how I typically work with this, I do a lot of consulting work. I ask for all the key people to come together, and I sit down with them and I pass out this transformation model. And individually, before we even get started, I say to them, here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to take a couple of minutes and I want you to write down, what do you think the results of this company have been over the last 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? What do you think the environment is like, out externally and internally? What do you think the strategy of this organization is? What do we do on core process, structure, systems? And then I give them 15, 20 minutes to work on this individually, and then I have them start sharing. And when you bring, whether it's 2, 5, 10, 20 senior leaders inside of an organization and have them answer these questions individually without sharing with each other first, and then you open it up and say, okay, let's start sharing, what do you think? It is eye-opening to every single person in the room that they are not aligned on most of these things, that they are silo-driven, they're internally focused, they're somewhat in a traditional paradigm, and that if we can't get senior leaders on the same page, imagine how that trickles down to everybody in the organization. So this is a very powerful model and also an extremely powerful exercise to get people to see how unaligned they really are, even though they think, because we show up every day and do our job, that we are aligned. Very, very powerful model.
Thanks, Chip. And it looks like you're already answering some of the questions. We have a number of questions that are showing up on our screen, so we'll get to those toward the end. But that's a great overview. Now let's get down into the detail, and I'm going to ask Tony to spend some time talking about strategy, core processes, and structure. So we'll start with strategy. Tony?
Thank you, Cassie. Yes, so as Chip mentioned, the 5 areas within the transformational model are areas that businesses have a direct control over. And as I am doing consulting work and working with small and mid-sized businesses here, for me, strategy is, I think, the linchpin for an organization to be able to have a path forward and make sure that they're hitting marks that they want to, being successful and having a successful year. And an example, I was just recently at a networking event here speaking with a gentleman who owns a small business, and we were discussing a number of different things, football teams, things like that. I started talking to him about the transformation model and how it can really be a huge asset as they're doing strategic planning for 2015. And he was really stuck on the importance of the strategy piece and why a business really needs to go through this. And he was a big college football guy and actually played college football. And I asked him a simple question, and I said, as you're preparing for a game on Saturday, did you guys just show up and play on Saturday, or did your coaches analyze the game film of the opponent and understand the strengths and weaknesses of the team you guys were playing, and try and identify areas of strength within your team that you can use as an advantage to win the game, and lay out a structured plan of how you were going to try and win the game on Saturday. And he said, well, we really spent a lot of time, and we analyzed, and we had a game plan in place. And I said, well, if you do that for a football game and a sport, I said, why would you not want to do that for your business? And really go through this strategy session, identify the core competencies of your business. What makes you different from other companies? What strengths do you have internally to leverage to make you a bigger player within the marketplace? Understanding the current products and services that you are able to offer as a business, as well as your competitors, is extremely important. Being able to identify, the market position that you have. What technical capabilities do you have maybe that separates you from your competitor? All of those on the business strategy side are absolutely critical in allowing a company to create a strategy that will guide them through the next 1, 3, and 5 years and beyond. And then also, along with the business strategy side, it's extremely important to understand the core ideology that your company has. If you're a small, mid-sized business, you really want to make sure that you understand the character side. Who are you? What is the mission of your business? Understand social relationships and how you can leverage those within your business to help you grow. Whether that is an online social network similar to a LinkedIn or a Facebook, or personal relationships that you may have within a religious organization or some sort of a social club. And then also, what is your philosophy? Is it an Eastern philosophy? Are you right-brained, creative? All of those items identified help you understand the strategy and your business, and how you're going to move forward through the next year and then also beyond. So for me, again, the strategy is absolutely critical when you're using this transformation model and identifying ways of how your business can grow. Okay, and then moving on to core processes. Core processes are really the nuts and bolts of how your business operates. How are you moving the widget through the factory? From the time the raw materials come in all the way until it's produced out the door and delivered ultimately to your end customer. Understanding support processes. Understanding variances within your key processes. There are items, that are within your control as a business, and then there are variances in your processes that come into play from outside. As a company, a good example of a key process variance is if you are getting raw material, you don't have the ability to truly make sure that raw material coming in meets your specs. You may have to go through an inspection process to make sure it does meet your spec, but you don't have control of that item coming in. Understanding the cycle time and efficiencies of how your product is moving through the delivery life cycle. And then, of course, computer delivery systems and making sure that you have the appropriate accounting software in place, customer relationship management software, those type of things. And a fantastic example of this is several years ago, I was working with a large manufacturing company here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And they were extremely concerned about the profitability of the company, and they were just having a really hard time identifying ways that they can reduce cost and increase their bottom line. Came in and started working through a model, this model, identifying strategy, took a look at their core processes, and one of the largest line items on their budget was around paying out grievances for overtime that was being improperly assessed out to union members that were on their shop floor. And the frontline supervisors were using a system of spreadsheets and Word documents to determine who should be brought in for overtime on off days, and also who should be kept for overtime at the end of a workday. It was a very inefficient model, and it was really no fault of the frontline supervisors. They were doing the best that they could. However, that process was extremely inefficient and just really ripe with, opportunity for people, for human error, and for mistakes to occur. Those mistakes ultimately cost the company a little over $100,000 per year on average over the past 3 years when I started working with them, in paying out grievance money for overtime that had been, inappropriately assigned. So we took a look at ways that they could reduce the amount of overtime that was being, handed out inefficiently, and ultimately we put in place a computer system that allowed the frontline supervisors to enter all of the employees that were in their business unit, and it would assign the overtime based on seniority and some other variables that were in the union contract. So within a very short period, we were able to reduce, their, outlay of overtime grievance money. The first year we reduced it to about $27,000, and then ultimately at the end of year 2, we had reduced it down to around the $5,000–6,000 range. So that was just a huge savings, and just by taking a look at a core process of how they were assigning their overtime, we were able to really drastically affect the bottom line of the company. So, looking at core process in this transformational model is also an extremely important exercise, and can identify a lot of ways for companies to grow and build upon some successes that they're having, or identify areas like the overtime example that I just gave. Okay, and then moving on to structure, this is another focus area that we look at during the transformational model assessment of a business. And the structure really focuses on looking at the organization chart and the relationship chart within a business. The organization levels, staffing numbers, do they have the appropriate number of managers to employees? Do they have too many employees? Do they have too many C-level executives? All of those type of things fall in there. We also look at the span of control. Are managers spread too thin? Are they responsible for 3 or 4 groups, and it's really too much, and they're not able to do their jobs effectively? Or is their span of control too narrow, and that could have an impact on how an item moves through the factory? Maybe they don't have the ability to control a process from end to end. Things like that are the span of control. Look at current groupings, how organizations are linked together, and then jobs and the roles structure within a company can be extremely important as we're looking at the transformation model. A good example of this, I was working for a large national consulting firm a number of years ago, and it was about the time that customer relationship management software was really coming into vogue, and companies were really becoming interested in understanding their clients and their customers, in a 360 view. And a lot of companies like Microsoft, they were coming online with their version of the customer relationship software. Salesforce was starting to come out with Salesforce.com. There were a number of different software solutions out there, but there were really so many choices sometimes that clients were having a hard time understanding the market and really picking a solution. So the consulting company that I was working with, I made a recommendation to our our executive leadership team that we form and build out a practice that was specific to customer relationship management software. We were, losing business to other consulting firms that had the ability to ramp up quickly and meet the client's needs because we did not have anyone in-house that we could readily have to go out on sales calls with account executives, or that were even on board if we were able to land a project with a client. We didn't have the staff on board to jump onto the project right away. So made the proposal, helped lead the creation of the customer relationship management practice, started it, from myself, and ultimately we built it out to about 14 employees. And what that allowed the consulting company that I was working for to do is immediately have expertise in-house who could help the account executives as they were going on sales calls. We had thought leaders within the organization who could help us with marketing material, understanding the new trends that were coming out in customer relationship management software to help us better identify products that we could recommend to clients. And then ultimately, when we were able to secure the projects with our clients, we had the expertise already in-house to go out into the field, and implement a solution for a client. So what that translated to is we went from having zero impact on the company's gross margin to being about a 14% effect on the consulting company's gross margin within the course of about 2.5 years. So it was a huge impact, and it really, putting that structure in place, allowed the consulting company to be very reactive and proactive as well for our clients. So that's just one example of how making some changes in the structure of an organization can have a huge impact to bottom line, and then ultimately to the company as a whole.
Great information, Tony. Thank you so much for providing some insight, even the football analogy in regards to helping us understand strategy and the impact and core processes, how it really can impact the bottom line. And in the case that you gave with the overtime example, gives us some insight to how core process can impact and benefit the company. And then, of course, the structure, knowing with the technology, the new CRM kind of software, but to see a 14% gross margin increase and the option to be proactive, very insightful in using this transformation model to the advantage of the company and the bottom line. Thank you. Okay, so let's move now. And Ray, I'm going to ask if you'll take us through the next two elements of the organizational transformation model. And these two include systems and culture. So Ray, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Cassie. Excited to be here. I come from a little different perspective as far as how I view things. I come from a perspective of actually being in the business and coming up with systems and cultures and how they're tied together. I kind of correlate like your arm. You want results, you decide what results you want. My result is I want to pick up a cup. Well, how do I do that? We have a system of doing it. It involves your elbow, your arm, your wrist. It's all part of the systems and how we do things. It's there's two types of system. There's a coordination system and there's the development system. Coordination, just like it sounds, consists of communication, information, and knowledge sharing. How you make decisions and who's authorized to make them. How you set goals and then measuring those and getting feedback. Setting policies and procedures. It's sort of like templates. And on the development side, you have the recruitment and selection, how you hire people, orientation, training, how they progress, how people get promoted, and performance evaluation, compensated, and recognition, which is a big part. And the other thing I'm going to talk about, of course, is the culture, and they're kind of linked together. And I'm going to give you a little example of how systems work, whether in a big organization or a small organization. Back in my construction days, many years ago, we had a reputation of putting a lot of concrete in the ground, if you will. We held records for in Baltimore City area for highways, most concrete poured on sidewalks, alleys, a whole bunch of stuff. And we were always coming up with, and we always wanted to improve ourselves. So I had a crew, and I had an incredible concrete crew that could put down concrete like nobody's business. The problem is, in the production part of it, was the setting of the forms and the excavation. So I brought them together and basically formed a mastermind group, if you will, to put these. You say, how can we get this? This is what I want. I explained to them the results that I wanted. I think before that we were getting like 400 feet a day in and out. And if you don't understand curb and gutter replacement, it's a patch type of thing. It's pretty difficult to do. Nobody even come close to that. But I told my people I wanted 1,000. And they said, well, how are we going to get it? And I said, well, let's figure it out. And I let them figure it out. So I engaged them to be involved in the process. They took responsibility, they took pride in it, and they developed a system from inventing a brand new excavating tool that took the curb out. They set up brand new form setting techniques that took the time from doing it in minutes to seconds. And the results were we couldn't come close. And I set up a bonus plan as well. So I set up the reward system, how to do it, and they actually took part in it and did this themselves. With my support, we were able to get close to the 1,000. We never got it, but they got their bonuses anyway. The result was we were doing 3 times more than what we were doing before because of the system that we set in place. And again, it all started with what results do you want. As far as culture goes, huge thing for me. Culture is, the systems, if you will, is how ideally you would like to do things. Culture is really how it works. And it's really comes down to it's what's really happening, what defines your company, your work environment, your values, your norms, your product, and your service. Culture is your company's DNA, and it's your unique qualifier. For us, like I said, we took pride in being the best in that field, and that was part of our culture, and we weren't going to let anybody else take us in that. And when you engage your employees, when you give them not just the responsibility and the authority, you give them the recognition that they deserve. They become part of the company. They buy into your vision. They become part of that. That company is them. So when you engage your employees, you develop a culture where the attitudes, they inspire, motivate each other. And it defines on their beliefs, their actions, and flows into their, how they treat their customers. It helps companies attract and retain the right employees. People wanted to come to work for my company. Why? Because they were treated right. The people worked as a team, and that's what I took pride in. They took pride in. You have higher employee satisfaction, better customer relations when you engage your employees and they're satisfied. And you have to couple this all with the reward system, right? It's all about starting from the top and having leaders basically buy into it. And it's always selling. They're selling themselves. They're selling their company. They're selling their employees. I said many leaders they focus on the pays and the perks, but studies have shown that if a company really wants to advance to a high performance level, they have to include the mission that allows both the team based on perks and rewards, and a culture that has purpose to attract and retain talent, engaging people and create energy. Leaders of companies who recognize that they have to engage people to build their culture, to create the morale that they want, the job satisfaction, they're the ones that are going to be successful. And as far as organizational transformation goes, it's not something that, it's not going to happen. It's going to happen. And if you've never been through a company that's, going through transformation, then a company probably doesn't exist because it's going to fail. Every company goes through. It's just a matter of if you're prepared for it or not. So basically, that's my experience, and they all fit together.
Great. Thanks, Ray. And I love how you brought in a whole different industry. I think a lot of times we think of business in a very traditional sense, but whether you're talking about construction or small businesses, large businesses, you know, all different skill sets, the way systems and cultures go together. I'm going to back this up and let us take a look at all of the look at the model again. We do have a number of questions that are coming in from our listeners, and so I want to ask some questions and allow our speakers to engage. The very first question that I have from Nikki is, how could an organization go through organizational transformation and that whole process be effective when management is still using the old or traditional type of mindset? What would you contribute, or how would you answer that, speakers?
Well, this is Chip. I'll start, and that is, you know, most organizations really don't feel the need to change anything if their paradigm is things are good, things are fine, we don't really need to change. And frankly, I know on my end, I don't work with organizations that aren't interested in change at some level. If the commitment level to change isn't there, then anything that we do will fall short. So sometimes, I know this isn't exactly what you might want to hear, but sometimes if the student's not ready to learn, it doesn't matter how much you teach. And if management, traditional management is in place, they're not interested in changing, and things are going well with the company. Not great, not as good as they could be, but they're making money, they're paying their bills. It's a very hard road to try and travel. I've been down it many times, and it typically doesn't work. We find that organizations that are the most open to what we do are the ones that are going through some type of change, whether it's positive change, meaning exponential growth, or change in a negative way. The organization's struggling. They're losing market share. Key people are leaving the organization. It's stagnant. They're not keeping up with technology. And until they're forced to change because of growth or because they're falling apart, you're really not going to see much. The other is, and I talked about this earlier, when you look at current results and you analyze the current results, the environment is seen through the paradigm of who you're asking the questions to. So they may feel like, hey, look, we're holding our own. We don't really need to change. So when you talk about strategy or culture, some of these things, it's going to be tough. I always tell people it's difficult when people inside the organization learn, they understand that changes need to happen, they understand that systems and process structure, those kind of things are changing and evolving in other organizations, but the organization they're in doesn't seem to evolve. They typically jump ship and go to other organizations, which is bad, or they stay in-house and struggle fighting the good fight until eventually something happens. Usually a customer leaves or cash flow shrinks or whatever it might be, and then senior level management's forced to make a decision.
Yeah, I think that's great insight. And like you said previously, Chip, most often you trigger those thinking of the traditional mindset by asking them if they are getting the results, that they want. Yep. And usually that helps trigger some of that too. Any other insight from our speakers on this particular question? Okay, then I'll move on to the next one. All things being equal, this question is by Ron. What is the average percentage of employees who leave on an involuntary basis when an organization is going through organizational transformation, or this model that we've been talking about? Chip, I'm going to throw this one at you.
Okay. Well, we see things on pretty much a consistent basis all the way across the board with all the research that we've done on kind of a bell curve. And I'll use the the most common bell curve that everybody understands, and that is the top 20% inside of your organization. These are your producers. They're going to be talented no matter where they work. They've just happened to have chose your organization and are committed to it. On the other end of the bell curve, you got the bottom 20%. These people are unhappy no matter where they're at. They're usually just skating by, trying to not get caught doing whatever they're doing, and we need to stop trying to fix these people because they're inherently flawed, and they're going to be flawed no matter where they work. The 60% in the middle is where our best percentage is at. And if we can look at those 60% and figure out a way to create a clear vision, a clear pathway for them personally to grow inside of the organization and also where the organization's going, that 60% is where our overall win is going to happen. And if we can move the middle by taking that 60% and retain the majority of them and actually increase their productivity by 5%, 10%, whatever the number might be, the top 20% are going to produce no matter what, and the bottom 20% are going to be woefully inadequate no matter what. It's the 60% in the middle that if we can move them by 5, 10, 15%, makes the biggest impact, and that's where our retention focus should be. It's really not managing to the bottom 20% because we know they're going to leave anyway, and we shouldn't manage to the top 20% because they're going to produce without us. It's the 60% in the middle that needs all of our attention. So when we look at organizations, we really need to look at, okay, if we were to put people into one of those three categories, knowing that the majority are in that middle, how do we manage to them and retain them?
Okay, great, great. Ray, did you have some insight on this? Sounds like we might have lost Ray. Let's move on to the. Yes, go ahead, Tony.
Hi, I was just going to jump in here as well, and
sure.
I would agree. My experience is very much in line with Chip and talking through the bell curve, and I think that 60% in the middle, keeping them when you start implementing a lot of the principles around high performance and having high performance teams where employees are really feeling like they're valued by an organization, that you have a culture of employee engagement where you're always listening to feedback, you're always recognizing successes and achievements within an organization. All of that, moving the culture really helps with employee retention. And my experience has been, that bottom 20%, as Chip was talking about, they're just skating by anyway. It wouldn't matter what changes you're making. If you were passing out $100 bills, they probably would find some reason to be unhappy about that because they'd want 200. So I think once an organization makes a decision to really truly embrace the high performance model and starts to get these processes, the strategy in place, the core process structure systems, and the culture in place to really move their organization down the road to high performance. Most, that 60% are excited about it. They see the vision. They're really looking forward to the company being there long term. And especially with the last few years and the volatility in our economy and in certain industries, employees are just really striving and hungry for that vision and leadership, and seeing that high performance model get put in place really, at least my experience is, employees really get excited about that and look forward to that.
Great. Now, speaking of culture, I have another question here from Edward. He wants to know, how do you change culture when you have a heavy influence of baby boomers within your demographic?
I'll take that, Cassie. It's Ray. I'm back on here.
Oh, hello, Ray. Welcome back.
That's a good question because baby boomers make up a large portion of our workforce, and they're going to be around for a while. Right now, we have the baby boomers, which were born between 1946 and 64. They make up about 31% of the workforce. You have the X generation, which makes up about 32%. And then you have the millennials, or the Y generation, which makes up about 33%. And believe it or not, you have what's called the traditionalists, which is those folks between 1900 and 1945 that make up about 4%. So in any case, the baby boomers, and they're very, very valuable, and they have a different work ethic than any other classes or generations. And the Generation X and Y think that they're workaholics because they come to work early, they leave late. So they're very valuable. They have a lot of knowledge, a lot of information, but they're also stuck in their ways. So it is difficult. It's one of the most difficult things to change an old timer who's been there, and and to work, and when to change the culture in. The truth is, in order to change anybody or anything, you have to engage them. And what a lot of times it involves a reward system. And what I have done in the past is create a mentoring system where you bring in the younger folks to work with the older ones. And I did one gentleman, we called him, he was an old grumpy guy, and but he had a lot of value. He was with the company for a long time, but he couldn't keep pace really with the educated people and where we wanted to go. So I didn't want to lose him, and I didn't want to lose the younger folks. So it's hard to make that cultural change, if you will. So I brought him in. I said, listen, I want you to mentor a couple of these young people and show them what you know. And he took a big pride in that. And he took upon himself to be the old man who was mentoring these young folks. But before he did that, I said, here's what we have to do, because things are changing. And an example is, he didn't really know how to look at specifications and details. And in construction, years ago, you could get away with that. But as times changed, it was critical that people follow the plan exactly in the details. Everything in construction has a picture, and you have to build it according to that picture. Well, old timers already knew, and they never bothered to look at it because they knew. So I said, you have to follow these rules, though. But because I gave him that responsibility of helping these younger folks, they became close-knit. And eventually, the new culture took over. And he became part of it. He became a lesser part because instead of being a foreman, he became an operator, but he knew where he would fit in this new culture, if you will.
Great. Yeah, that's great insight, to just identify where they're coming from, what are their strengths, and then how do you merge all of these different generations, multi-generations working in the same environment. And, of course, that would definitely impact this organizational transformation. Any other insight on that specifically? Okay, if not, I'm going to change gears. Here's another question. Discuss organizational transformation in the context of super small businesses. For example, 2 or 3 people. How do you go through that process, implement this model?
Well, Cassie, this is Chip again. I'll talk briefly about that, and that is this: the 7 focus areas work if you are a sole proprietor that wants to grow into a larger organization, or it works in a very large organization to get everybody on the same page. So whether you have 1 person, 2, 3, 4, it doesn't really matter. These are critical factors that every organization has to look at. They have to have results. They have to have a clear look at what's going on externally and internally in the environment. If fuel costs go up, and you're a 3-person company that delivers products or services, that external environment will affect us. And so we as a team, even if there's 3 of us, have to understand what's going on externally. We have a new customer, a competitor that moves into town. How does that affect us? Internally, how are we going to cut costs to be able to compete and stay in business? So the environment. And then strategy. Again, whether you're by yourself or you have 3 people on the team, you have to have a clear strategy of where we're headed. What are our core processes that we do every day? How do we work together structurally? What systems, software, different things are we going to use to run the business? And then culturally, how are we going to stay a small company if that is our strategy, or think big because we want to be big. Again, these are core foundational principles that whether you're 3 people or 3,000 apply.
Okay, great. Thanks. Any other input? Tony?
Yeah, hi, Cassie. This is Tony. I was just going to add in there as well. I mean, I agree with what Chip said, and I would almost argue that these principles and going through this assessment is almost it's as critical or almost more critical for a small company. Just take, for instance, if a small business, a 3-person company is making a decision on an accounting package, to a large multinational company, if they make a mistake and they purchase the wrong software solution for their needs, it's impactful to their bottom line, but they can probably survive. If a small 3-person company invests $10,000 incorrectly, that could mean the difference between them staying in business or going out of business. So I would almost argue that it's even more critical for smaller companies to go through this process and really understand all of these areas and really make the best decision that they can with the information at hand as they're working through this assessment, because a small company just does not typically have the cash flow to recover from really big mistakes, and not identifying a lot of the things in this using this model can just be disastrous for a small company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense from a margin standpoint. The impact is greater. It's exponential the smaller you are. Yeah, I see that. Okay, well, another question Carolyn has, and changing direction just a little bit. She says, how do you get buy-in from union leaders and the manufacturing floor, and do we have any best practices in regards to going through this transformation?
Well, this is Chip again. I've worked with a couple of organizations that are union driven, and also people that work in the factories or on the floor. And I'll tell you that, it really depends on the union itself and how open they are to understanding the massive changes that are going on externally in the environment and the demands that go with it. If you look at American Airlines and a couple of the big ones that have had to go through some changes, it's a struggle. It is a big struggle, and the union leaders have to be able to see things through a different paradigm, just like the owner, just like the companies have to see things through a different paradigm to survive long term. Unions were a very valuable resource many, many years ago, and some will debate whether or not they still have the validity that they did years ago because of the constant change and evolution of the way businesses run today. And it really depends on how traditional a model is inside of that union versus if they can see through a different paradigm of where things are headed and make sure that they stay on the same page.
Good, thank you. Hey, Ray, this sounds like it might be in your area of expertise. Do you have any insight here in regards to best practices?
As far as dealing with it, no, I don't. I agree with Chip that it has to be, regardless of what it is, they have to buy into it. They have to see an interest in it for themselves, and it could be just the survival of the company.
Okay.
That's basically it.
Okay, and it sounds like even a lot of your emphasis on this whole model, Ray, the foundation for you is a lot around culture.
Absolutely. To me,
okay, yeah. Okay, and in this case with union leaders in manufacturing, you impact the environment by impacting the culture. So good insight. One more question I think we have time for. This is from Kristen, and she says, how do you bring in a new CEO when other senior managers don't think it's necessary? And I'm assuming this is linked directly to bringing in change within the organization.
Well, it has to start with asking senior managers why they don't believe we need a new CEO. And most of the time, we have to remember that emotion drives behavior, not logic. And so most of the time, people will give you logical reasons why, in their opinion, logical reasons why we don't need to bring someone else in. But understand that most of the time, that logic is driven by how they feel, the emotion that's tied to it. And it's usually fear, fear of loss, fear of change, fear of the unknown, and also if they're in a competitive environment, a new CEO that's brought from within the organization, maybe not even externally, then again goes into that pecking order situation. And so most of the time it's driven by emotion, fear of loss, potential, it's really not potential gain, it's fear of loss. Now they will logically try to explain why they don't think it's a good idea, but caution you, most of the time that logic is filtered through their emotional reasons. We got to get to the emotion.
I agree, and then I think this, you just pull this model back up, and you can walk through the whole process of, will a new CEO change the results that the company is currently getting, and if that's the case, then how does that impact the environment, and then of course the strategy and core processes, et cetera, through that. Any other insight from our speakers? Ray or Tony?
Cass, I'd like to add something to that. According to a recent Harvard Business Review, when they considered that the CEOs came from outside the company, which generally only happens in mid-performing and low-performing firms, high-performance companies almost never replace their CEOs from the outside. And that has to do a lot with involuntary turnover as well. So it's the companies that are prepared and are performing at a high level go through less stress and less pain.
Okay, so even growing from within.
Yeah.
Again, it's a different dynamic of the culture that's been created, of advancement and working with a new CEO that they already know and trust and believe in. Would follow along with some of the things that you've already said. Okay, any closing thoughts, Tony, Chip, or Ray?
In closing, what I would say is if there's anybody that's on this call that would like to get a copy of these 7 focus areas, don't hesitate to shoot me an email, chip@360solutions.com. Be more than happy to get you this information and the slides that are on here because it is a good framework, at least to even start a discussion if you're inside of a small or large company with your senior level team and say, how aligned are we on these things? And do we take the time to look and measure each of these individually? And is it a valid framework for us to even look at in terms of 2015 and beyond? Are we focused on the right things?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Tony, Ray?
Yeah, hi, Cassie.
I'm good. I enjoyed it.
I would just, the final thought for me would be that, going through the transformation model and looking at all of the 7 different areas on some sort of a regular basis is critical for companies who want to succeed and continue to be successful moving forward. I think there's an old Chinese proverb that if you don't plan for where you're going, you just may get there. So you really need to know where you're going as an organization and have a firm roadmap in place to get you to your goals.
Great, thank you. Ray, closing thoughts?
Just that I'm passionate about taking these old traditional companies, leadership models, and transforming them into high-performance companies.
Great.
And that's basically all I have to say.
Great. Thank you, guys. Chip, Tony, Ray, we enjoyed spending time with you and exploring the different avenues of organizational transformation. We do have another webinar scheduled in January, and so I want to just give you a heads up on that. BJ Shelton, Scott Kiefer, and Chip will be our panelists. And on this webinar, We're going to talk about managing success of your organization, avoiding ideas that were all the same, identifying unique contributions, and learning to provide diverse environments to celebrate success as we look at celebrating success on our next webinar. We will be hosting this webinar on January 21st, so put that on your calendars at 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. And if you've got any questions, you can contact us at Cassie@360solutions.com. Have a great afternoon and Merry Christmas.